Hi everyone, I'm Chana Mason, Vitality Coach, coming to you live from my Jerusalem living room. Welcome, welcome. I got my yoga mat over here. If you want to join me for yoga, just let me know. And this is a different kind of episode of the Vitality Show where I'm really just going to be sharing my own experiences and my own thoughts rather than interviewing someone else and getting their experiences and their thoughts. And firstly, I want to say that today is very much a response to a request from one of my students, Rachel, who really wanted me to share more about our lifestyle and how we eat and what is all the research that I've done to back up our lifestyle and how we eat. Because for me, I'm kind of a science geek. I studied engineering in school. I really like to use science to back up the work that I do. And just have gained a passion for learning about health and nutrition. And so I asked if I could get a list of questions. So, sorry, hold on one second. I got this weird notification that came up and I'm just gonna get it out of the way. So please, if you have questions yourself, please put them in the comments. I can't guarantee that I'm gonna get to all of the questions today. We're gonna spend half an hour together in this live. And if you have questions in the future, you're welcome to post them. I might dedicate every Thursday to this. I'm not sure. It's an experiment, so we'll see how it goes. The first question I want to respond to is, what is the research that I use in backing up the lifestyle choices that we make? So it's a really, really interesting thing that most of us as human beings have a tendency to lean on experts in order to make decisions about how we're going to live our lives. We go to religious leaders like priests or rabbis in order to access knowledge about how to elevate our consciousness and get closer to God and be better human beings and be kinder and more compassionate. We might lean on our lawyers to figure out how we're going to make an effective contract when we're engaging in a business deal or real estate deal or something like that. And when it comes to our health, we tend to lean on physicians. And physicians have years of training and they learn so much about the human body. So it makes perfect sense that when we go to our doctor and we're trying to figure out how to keep ourselves healthy, they're going to be the person that we're going to ask. And unfortunately, that's like kind of a kink in our logic. And the reason that is that in the traditional allopathic medical world, physicians learn a lot about the human body. They learn a lot about emergency care, and they learn a huge amount about pharmaceutical drugs. So they learn about how to treat ailments with medication. What they don't learn about is nutrition. So most physicians will learn anywhere from 2 to like 10 hours of nutrition during their many years of education, which basically means that they're not any more educated than the average person on the street when it comes to food. But because so many people come to them asking them about what they should eat, they feel the need to respond with something. So they end up responding with whatever is in sort of the public discourse. Except that the public discourse is controlled, and controlled is a strong word, but like incredibly enhanced by certain monetary desires, right? There are companies that want to make money. They spend a lot of money on advertising, and they spend a lot of money advertising in the media, and the media wants to keep their businesses going. So they're going to say the things that keep those companies happy. That's sort of like basic business economics. We're not talking about conspiracies here, nothing shady going on. It's just sort of like how the world works, right? And there's certain things that are basically kind of like old wives' tales or theories that were put out a long time ago about what's good for people to do and to eat. But it actually, when it's been studied, there's no data supporting it. So one example of that is that people believe that they need a lot of protein in order to live. And this protein theory was presented over 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago, when there was all of this malnourishment, particularly in Africa and other parts of the world. And they were trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with these emaciated people and how are we going to help them? And a theory was put out that what these people were lacking was protein. And so if we just get them enough protein, then they're going to be okay. So it's been studied in the medical literature. When I use the term medical literature, what I mean is the major medical journals like Nature and the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine. We're not talking about like, hippy dippy guy on the corner, making a pamphlet. We're talking about the major medical literature. So the studies that are published there around food are incredibly consistent about the foods that make people healthy and the foods that don't. And it turns out that being protein deficient is almost impossible unless you're food deficient. So if you're malnourished and you're just not getting enough food, chances are you're not getting enough protein, but you're also not getting enough of anything else. You're not getting enough carbohydrates or fat, or for sure not micronutrients and vitamins and minerals. You're starving. And when you're starving, bad things happen. The deficiencies that do come up in, typical doctors' offices and in the medical literature all over the place are deficiencies in vitamins and minerals, never in protein. And it's really super important to understand that, because most people put a tremendous amount of focus on protein when they're thinking about their health and very little focus on vitamins and minerals. And vitamins and minerals literally make every single part of our body function in so many levels. And I'm not going to go into detail about that. It's something you can research later. But just to kind of shift your focus. The other thing is that you're not just feeding a human being. Even though you look at yourself, you're like, oh, I'm a human being. It turns out that you have more microbial cells in you and on you than you have human cells. Okay, just get that. Bacteria, parasites, viruses, fungi, some of which are kind of good guys, so to speak, some of which are kind of bad guys, so to speak, but they actually work in a symbiotic relationship within a healthy system. And you have trillions of these cells, and literally over 99% of your DNA is microbial DNA, not human. And so you've got to feed the microorganism, right? Like this whole ecosystem that you are, and not just the human being that you are. And for that reason, it's super duper important for you to eat the foods that the microbes, the good guys, the ones that like you and want to serve you and support your immune system and produce compounds that you really need to survive, that you feed them. And what they thrive on are fiber-rich foods. So what's fiber, okay? Fiber is the stuff that when you eat some lettuce and you have to chew and chew and chew, that's your fiber, right? So there's lots of fiber in bread, there's fiber in fruits, there's fiber in vegetables, in nuts and in seeds and in legumes and in whole grains. The food that doesn't have fiber is animal products. So milk and meat and fish and chicken and eggs, all those animal products have zero fiber. What they have a ton of, and they also have zero carbohydrate content, what they have a ton of is protein and fat. And it just so happens that human beings aren't designed to eat a lot of protein and fat. So if you look at human milk is mostly sugar. It's got a lot of sugar. And it also has this one kind of sugar that the human body can't digest. It's a sugar specifically designed for bacteria to digest. Only bacteria can digest it. From the get-go, mother's milk is already nourishing the gut microbiome, right? All the little microbes inside of the baby's belly. Already from the get-go, even our milk is designed to support not just the human part of us, but the ecosystem part of us. So getting this concept that you need lots of fiber, lots of vitamins and minerals, very little protein and very little fat totally changes everything. Now, another thing that's really important to understand is that protein is the building block of life. Okay, so if you think about protein as being Legos, that's super duper helpful. So if you think about your entire body is built up of, lots of cells, right? Lots and lots of Legos. And on a daily basis, how much building and repair are you doing? So you'll notice children are doing a lot of building and repair, which is why they eat a lot of food. But for the rest of your life, you're not doing very much building and repair unless you're a really serious bodybuilder. And even then, even a really serious bodybuilder spends most of their resources just moving through the day, okay? So if you think about your body, God forbid, because you're so much more than this, but just on a simple level, if you think about your body as being a car, okay? So a car gets repaired maybe once a year, maybe it goes through, like little tweaks here and there. Maybe there's a dent, maybe something needs to be fixed. Maybe you change a tire, right? Once every decade, you change a battery once every decade, right? Building and repair happens very, very little. And the fat that you eat is lubricant, right? How often does your car need an oil change? Once every 3 months, because you only use a little bit of oil. But in order to move through life, the fuel you need to move through life is sugar, okay? And when I say sugar, I'm talking about carbohydrates. I'm not talking about the white stuff in the jar, okay? Obviously, I'm talking about fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes are chock full of simple and complex sugars. And that's the fuel that you need to get you through the day, because most of the day you're not engaged in building and repair. You're not engaged in lubricating your body. Most of what you do is just move. You need fuel, you need gasoline in your engine to get through the day, which is why the vast majority of the food that you eat should be rich in energy. And so that's another reason why plants are so important, okay? And after learning this, along with so many other things, my family shifted towards a whole food, plant-based diet. We're really trying to eat the foods that nourish our systems, but also nourish our microbiome, and stay away from the foods that create disease. Now, in the medical literature, which has been around for about 100, 120 years, we have thousands. I don't mean a few, I don't mean one, I don't mean a dozen. We have thousands of studies showing a consistent correlation between plant consumption and longevity, meaning you eat your fruits and vegetables, you live longer. There's also a consistent correlation between animal consumption and disease. And one of the reasons is that the microbes that feed on animal products produce compounds that make you sick, in a nutshell. Another reason is that animal products by their nature, doesn't matter if they're grass-fed, doesn't matter if they're organic, doesn't matter if they came from a happy hen in a pasture in Scotland, it doesn't matter. If you're eating animal products, those animal products cause harm to your body. So it was really, really crazy because we just came from the most beautiful wedding in the hills of Judea and saw a family we haven't seen in a number of years. And Dave and I just kept looking at each other, talking about how the mom and the dad, the husband and the wife, like they look so good. And we keep noticing that a huge percentage of our peer group, year after year, they look less and less healthy. They've got more ailments, they've got more joint pain, they're fatter, they're slower, they're more sluggish, they don't feel as good, they're getting more heart issues and diabetes issues and all sorts of hormonal issues and all this stuff. But these guys, literally, their faces were glowing. And it's not just because it was in the 90s and we were outside and it was crazy hot. They're literally glowing. These people look amazing. And we asked them what they're doing. And they shifted into a plant-based diet. And now they're eating tons of plants, tons of fruit, and tons of vegetables. Now, you might be like, wait, fruit? How can I eat fruit? It's got sugar. Sugar's not good for you. So there's actually no evidence in the medical literature that there's anything bad with fruit. There is tons of evidence, believe it or not, that the more fruit you eat, the longer you live. And it's not like there's a limit to it. This isn't one of those things you do in moderation. The more fruit you eat, the longer you live. Does that mean that you could eat fruit all day? Honestly, yes. So why is that? Remember how we were talking about, or I was talking about how protein is the building block of life? Let's look at a watermelon. A watermelon is life. It's it came from a garden. And how did it come to build itself up? It built itself up through a protein structure. It's also chock full of sugar. You know that because when you put it in your mouth, it's super duper sweet and yummy, right? And it's got a lot of water. It also has a lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals, and a lot of micronutrients. Also crawling all over the watermelon is microbes, and those microbes are really good for you. And when you eat the watermelon, those microbes go into your system too. And that might sound kind of gross, but welcome to life. We're part of an ecosystem, okay? So you're getting protein from the watermelon. There's very little fat in watermelon, to be honest, but you're getting some protein, but mostly you're getting sugar. And you need that sugar to move through the day, and you need your vitamins and minerals to move through the day, and you need a lot of water. 75% of your body is made of water. And what's so cool about getting your water from plants is that it's water that is very mineral rich. Like when you get water from the tap, it's kind of dead. If you've ever had the opportunity to drink from a natural spring or from mountain water or something like that, you'll notice that the water is just, it has a richness and a wholeness to it. And because it's constantly passing through rocks, it picks up little minerals along the way. And those minerals make the water more kind of like electrically complete, which makes it hydrate you much better. You might notice sometimes you drink water and you feel really hydrated, and other times you feel less hydrated. I went through a phase a couple of years ago where all I ate was fruit for like a year and plus. All I ate was fruit, and I just stopped drinking water. I just wasn't thirsty anymore because I was getting so much hydration from the fruit that I was eating. So the really interesting thing about fruits and vegetables is that most fruits and vegetables are over 90% water. And so you're getting so much water. You're also getting a ton of fiber. The other thing that happens is you get really full on very few calories. So if you're looking to be leaner, then that's a really great way to do it. Just eat lots of fruits and vegetables, and you get full with eating practically nothing, right? The challenge is that sometimes what we do is we make ourselves this incredible salad, and then we pour a ton of fat on the salad. Now that fat can come, you know, you might get this like creamy dressing or olive oil or something. You might be like, oh, it's really healthy or whatever. The challenge is that all of that fat is very calorie dense. It's got a lot of calories in it, which honestly is fattening. But the other thing that happens is that fat can make you kind of sluggish. I don't know if you've noticed this in your body, but you'll definitely notice it if you just don't have fat for a week. Like you literally cut all oil and all fat out of your diet for 1 week. After that, try having oil, and you'll notice how like sticky and greasy and sluggish it makes your whole system. I notice for me, whenever I eat oil, it takes me a couple days to kind of get it out of my system, and I'm much more apt to get kind of congested, and my throat will hurt a little bit because my body's trying to figure out how to get it out. So your body doesn't actually need oil. So this brings me back to the original question. What do we eat? So we eat a whole food, plant-based diet. And I'm going to slow that down. So plant-based means we eat plants. So if it grows from the ground or from a tree, which is also from the ground, we eat it. If it doesn't, we don't. Okay? And that's because plants are really good for you. And animal products, to be blunt, are not. Animal products are the reason people are getting heart disease and cancer and type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's and dementia and joint pain and arthritis, and a lot of autoimmune diseases are caused by the consumption of animal products. You want to argue with me about it? Happy to chat. In any case, okay, so the whole food plant-based diet. So the other part of it is the whole food part. Hold on 1 second, somebody rang my doorbell. Dave, can you get that? Okay, great. So we eat foods that are whole as opposed to eating foods that are, I'm trying to think of how to explain it. Part is kind of the best way of putting it. So for example, if you take an apple and you bite into the apple, you're getting a whole food. But if you take that apple and then you only take the sugar out of it so that you get this like apple concentrate stuff, it no longer has fiber, it no longer has its water, it's just this like very thick, dark syrup. So you no longer have a whole food. That's the same thing that happens with sugar. You take sugar cane, you make it into juice, you take all the water out of that juice, you've taken all the fiber out of the plant, and all you have left is these crystals of sugar. That's not a whole food. And I think most people kind of get that that's one of the problems with sugar, is that it's just been like stripped out of everything that it came from. And you could imagine that with white flour also, right? You've taken all the bran out of the plant and you're just left with this one thing. Now, the challenge is that people often don't know that there are other things that are also not whole foods. One of them being oil. So an olive is a whole food. You've got fiber, you've got phytonutrients, you've got macronutrients, all sorts of different nutrients, vitamins and minerals, but you've got a lot of fiber in an olive. Like you got to chew it and chew it and chew it until it's ready to be swallowed, okay? But if you take all the fiber out of the olive and you only have olive oil, so you no longer have a whole food. And it's actually easy to see that if you're trying to do dishes or you're trying to, and even if you've just used raw oil, it's really hard to clean. It's very sticky, congesting, goopy kind of stuff. And I noticed that as soon as we cut oil out of our diet, and just so you have a frame of reference, my family was eating a liter of olive oil a week. I was like literally dousing it over all of my food. I was putting a ton of it in salads and in salad dressings and cooking with it and everything. So much oil. And as soon as I stopped doing that, my sink became so much easier to clean. Our dishes clean twice as fast, but also our drain, I used to have to clean it once every couple months. I clean it like once or twice a year now because it doesn't get super gooked up with like fat that then gets stuck to it. And you'll definitely notice if you're used to eating animal products or cooking with lard or butter, that's really particularly like sticky, goopy stuff. So we eat a whole food, plant-based diet. And that's the diet that the research is consistently showing that reverses heart disease. It's the only diet to ever be proven to reverse heart disease, reverses diabetes, in some cases reverses Alzheimer's. In our family, it's kept us significantly less sick. We used to get colds a lot more. My son used to get a cold every single month, and he's one of the healthiest teenagers I know. His face is pretty darn clear of acne. My face, as soon as I cut oil out of my diet, my face cleared up from acne. We had some eczema in the house. All the eczema is gone. So I definitely noticed there's just so many things that have been cleared away. And what was interesting was that these friends of ours at the wedding, my girlfriend was saying that her husband has been using an inhaler for over 40 years, and he doesn't use an inhaler anymore, because he stopped eating animal products and he nourished and cleaned his body through eating plants. Like that's a huge thing. Like how many people out there have asthma that's really actually just the body's reaction to eating animal products. The same is also true for depression. When I work with clients who are struggling with anxiety or depression, one of the first things I tell them to do, in addition to making sure that they have vitamin D and vitamin B12 supplements, is to make sure that they're exercising and eat a whole food plant-based diet. A whole food plant-based diet has actually been shown to be more effective than Prozac in double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. Like, how crazy is that? Where they take people, I guess it's not double-blind because they know what they're eating and they know they're not taking the pill. But the people getting Prozac had, versus a placebo, the whole food plant-based diet did better than Prozac, better than the placebo. That's really incredible. A whole food plant-based diet also has much bigger impacts on every health outcome you want to learn about, from heart disease to diabetes to weight loss, than exercise. In addition to, if somebody's dealing with depression, a healthy diet will trump exercise any day of the week. That might be difficult for some people to like really understand and comprehend, because we're so used to doctors saying you got to exercise. And yes, exercise is good for so many reasons, but a whole food plant-based diet, if you start with that, what that's going to do is give you more energy to be able to exercise in the first place. And it's also going to get rid of a lot of the heaviness, the pain, the sluggishness, the excess weight. So that was one of the questions that I got from one of my students, Pina. She wanted to know, how do you lose those excess 10 to 20 pounds? And for most people, we're getting a lot of excess calories unnecessarily. So remember I was talking about that liter of olive oil that we literally cut out of our diet. I use olive oil to light candles. That's it. I don't cook with oil at all. And so, oh, right, Dave puts a tiny little bit of olive oil in his bread. If I was making the bread, I wouldn't put olive oil in it. That's the sort of like a family argument. Now he's like, what? How can you say that? That's me. Okay. But in any case, back to the whole question of olive oil. A tablespoon of oil is 120 calories. So for those of you who aren't familiar with like, okay, what are calories and how exactly does that work? So calories are sort of a sign of how much energy can be produced from this quantity of food. And to give you a frame of reference, the average adult needs about 2,000 calories. Women need a little bit less, some men need a little bit more, but let's just go with 2,000 just to keep it simple. A tablespoon of olive oil is 120 calories. A mango is 120 calories. I had a mango for breakfast this morning, and then I was full. If I had a tablespoon of olive oil, besides like a little bit gagging, because oil by itself is kind of nasty, I wouldn't have been full, not in the least. It's calorie dense, but it's very nutrient poor. Whereas a mango is nutrient rich and calorie poor, okay? If you really want to go crazy, it takes pretty much the same amount of energy to digest a cucumber as calories in the cucumber, right? If you think about really water-rich foods, mangoes are actually very calorie dense. If you think about really water-rich foods like leafy greens, cucumbers, melons, you can eat a lot of that stuff and you're just not getting that many calories. So if you're looking to lose that excess weight, so most people are cooking with olive oil, putting it in their salads, putting it on their foods. So for a lot of people, they're eating just oil alone 2 to 3 tablespoons a day. So if you do the math, let's say I'm getting 3 tablespoons of oil a day. Let's say I'm getting 1 tablespoon of oil a day, which most people are getting way more than that. 1 tablespoon of oil a day. In a month, that's a pound. That's a pound of weight if I just cut that 1 tablespoon of oil a day. That's a huge difference. Now, one of the things that is really nice about having a lean body, which my body could be a lot more lean, but it just so happens I like to eat a lot. And I kind of eat like a horse. So I'm not as lean as I'd like to be, but I'm pretty lean and our family's pretty lean. One of the nice things about having a lean body is that you're not putting so much weight on your body. So if you think about, picking up a suitcase, if it's a 10-pound suitcase, it's a lot less work than if it's a 50-pound suitcase. When you're lugging around a 50-pound suitcase, you're working really hard, and you'll notice that it puts pressure on your joints and your bones and your muscles to be like picking up all that weight. Any woman here who's been pregnant will also notice that like when you're carrying around this like excess baby and the water and the placenta and all of that, like it's so much more work just to walk. You cuffing and puffing to carry all that weight. It puts a lot of pressure on the ankles and the knees and the hips. It's like all this stuff. So the leaner that you can be, the less work your body has to engage in order just to carry you around. But the other thing is that there's less cells to take care of. That means there's less cells to repair. There's less cells to clean. There's less cells to dispose of when they die. You're just a more compact, easy to maintain system. You could almost say it's kind of like the difference between maintaining like a tiny little car versus maintaining a fleet of trucks. It's just so much more work the more stuff there is to maintain. So for me, I think that's really the key to getting rid of the excess weight, is getting rid of excess calories that don't actually really nourish you. And that brings me back to when I was talking about carbohydrates and protein and fat. So most people are used to thinking about these categories in some sort of like scientific-y kind of way, with almost like pseudoscience, because most of us aren't scientists, we're lay people. And so these are not terms we really relate to. So I'm going to put them back into terms you relate to. Carbohydrates, fuel. Protein, building and repair. Oil, the fat, is lubricants, okay? So if you think about throughout your body, like you have boogers and you got earwax and you have cholesterol, which lines the walls of your veins and arteries. If there's any like broken stuff or inflammation, if you have a boo-boo, you get this like whole hot red area with white stuff. So that white stuff has some fat in it. You also have fat in your cells and like on the cell walls that kind of hold it together. But fat is actually something you need very little of. And one of the indications you have that is if you look around in nature. Fat's hard to get in nature. So coconuts, really high up, really difficult to access. All other nuts have very short seasons. They have a really hard shell. They're hard to, you have to work really, really hard to get a nut. Avocados have a 2-week season, even though many people would be like, 2 weeks, that doesn't make sense. Like, I can get avocados all year round at Trader Joe's or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's the modern world. But if you actually look in nature, an avocado tree will bear fruit for about 2 weeks out of the year. And that's sort of nature's way of telling us where fat should fit into our diet. And it's not that much. We don't need much of it. Mother's milk has very little fat in it. And fat is important, but we only need a small amount. And the data seems to indicate that we do pretty well when about 80% of our calories come from carbohydrates, about 10% from protein, and about 10% from fat. So even a banana has about 10% protein. So please, please stop worrying about protein and don't have a non-whole way of getting your protein. So like a protein powder is not a whole food, right? But like a chickpea, that's a whole food, right? And then you need about 10% of fat. And your fat, you want it to also come from whole foods. So we're talking about nuts and seeds and avocado and whole coconuts, right? Like actual coconut, not coconut oil. And so what I do in my household to make sure that we get some fat, but not too much fat, is I don't cook with oil and I make desserts that have fat in them because fat's just yummy together with like sugar stuff. It's just yummy. But the other thing I do is I make sure that our salad dressings have some fat in them. And the reason is that a lot of the vegetables that are in salads, particularly leafy greens, are chock full of what are called fat-soluble vitamins. Those are vitamins that you need fat in order to digest. So vitamin A is a perfect example of that. And you know there's vitamin A that's good for your eyes, that's in the carrots. So you need to eat it with some fat. But that fat doesn't need to come from oil that's very calorie dense but nutrient poor. We want to have foods that have lots of nutrients, not so many calories. So an example of that is tahina, which is how we say it in Hebrew, and tahini is how they say it in America. So I'll use tahina as a base for my salad dressing, and tahina is just ground up sesame seeds. Sesame seeds are a whole food, just grinding them up to make tahina. And then in there, I'll put, for example, if you want a recipe, I'll put apple cider vinegar or lemon juice or balsamic vinegar, some sort of vinegar, lemony kind of thing, and fresh herbs. And I could put soy sauce or miso or salt. And what else? I usually put a little bit of honey because tahina is a little bit bitter, and I love honey so much. And anybody who's like vegan and doesn't like honey for animal reasons, so you can use date honey or you can use whole dates. If you want to put your dressing in the blender, you could just put a date and that'll do the trick. And dates are really awesome and chock full of fiber and delicious. So that's kind of a salad dressing recipe. For example, you can use avocado, in which case I would put it in the blender. An avocado salad dressing recipe I really like when avocados are in season is avocado, lemon juice, chives or green onions, fresh dill, and soy sauce or salt and mustard. And that's like a super rich, nourishing, creamy dressing. I just make sure that I don't have so much avocado that then I end up having this like super fat, heavy meal. And so really shifting out of having too much fat in our diet has been really huge. So something else that's really, really important if you want to eat a whole food plant-based diet is to eat beans. You know the saying, beans are good for your heart? The data consistently shows that this is true. Beans are really good for your heart. Why? For multiple reasons, one of which is they're chock full of fiber. And the bacteria that eat fiber produce compounds that keep your heart doing good, keep all sorts of parts of your body doing good. The other thing that's really interesting about legumes are like beans and chickpeas and lentils and stuff like that. I kind of call them all beans. That's just my word for it. Is that they temper your blood sugar in whatever meal you're eating. So let's say I'm eating chickpeas and salad and rice. So whatever blood sugar spike might come from the rice and the chickpeas, the fiber, and all the food that I'm eating, whatever blood sugar goes up, so the legumes will kind of temper it and keep it from going up too much. But the really cool thing is they don't just do that for the meal I'm eating. They also do it for the next meal. So in this meal and in the next meal, my blood sugar is going to be tempered by the beans that I eat. Beans are also really hearty and satiating and filling. They're chock full of fiber. They have a lot of really important minerals in them, and they're incredibly versatile. You can make burgers out of them. You can make soups out of them. So I'll give you a quick burger recipe. If you like buckwheat or kasha or quinoa, you can cook some, throw it in a bowl, cook some beans, any bean you like. You could use chickpeas or black beans or kidney beans or lentils, throw that in a bowl. Take some ground flax seeds. Flax seeds are chock full of omega-3 fatty acids. Not flaxseed oil, just flax seeds. If you grind them up, you can access the stuff that's inside of them much, much better. Otherwise, you might find the whole flax seeds exiting the other side without being digested at all, because their cell wall's really, really strong. So in any case, so I put ground flaxseed in there as a replacement for eggs, so it's a binder. And then I shred tons of vegetables like zucchini and carrot, onion. You could chop up some garlic and fresh herbs or dried herbs. You could use curry powder if you want, or a Cajun powder, or whatever, garam masala or curry, whatever you want. And you throw that all into the bowl and mix it all together, and then clump it into burgers and bake at about 350, which is 180 Celsius, sorry, 350 Fahrenheit, about 180 Celsius for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, something like that. And then you can make a really nice sauce using Chana and a little sweetener like date honey or regular honey or maple syrup and soy sauce and maybe some herbs. You mix that all together. Oh, and water, so that it's not so thick and fatty. And you can use that as a sauce, or you can make a homemade ketchup out of tomato paste and dates. And I also like to put like a little bit of something fat in there. You could also throw nuts or seeds into your burgers, and that's a complete meal. What's really cool about burgers is you can freeze them and then pull them out and pop them in a toaster oven for whenever you want, and you have a complete meal. You've got vegetables, you've got whole grains, you've got legumes. You're good. And I promise that today, clearly I'm not going to answer everyone's questions, but I did promise today. Oh, there's so many comments, I wasn't paying attention. Look at that. Okay. 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 So what was I going to say? I mentioned that today I was going to share a recipe for really healthy brownies. So here goes. You take, I don't use cans. We make everything fresh in our house. But you can either take a can of chickpeas, or you can take about 1.5 cups of chickpeas. I personally don't think it's enough, so I always double this recipe for your information. Okay, and then for that, you take about, the original recipe that I'm basing this on uses sugar, and I don't want to use sugar. I want to use whole food. So what do I do when I want to replace sugar? This is what I do. I use dates. Dates replace sugar 1-to-1 perfectly, and dates, you'll notice, are hard. Unlike a liquid sweetener like maple syrup, which isn't really whole food either, it doesn't have any fiber in it, a liquid sweetener like maple syrup is going to make whatever recipe you're making come out like kind of mushy and goopy. But if you use dates, they'll end up hard in your recipe. So I use dates when I make cakes. And I take the dates and the flour and just mill them together in the food processor until they break up, like with an S blade, until they break up and you have this like fine, sweet powder. And that's what I end up, it's not so fine, it's kind of a gritty powder is more like it. And that's what I use as my flour and my sugar in my recipe. But here in this recipe, we're not using flour. So you have about 1.5 cups of chickpeas, and then about 3/4 cup of dates. Maybe it's a whole cup of dates. It really doesn't matter because the dates are really good for you, so you can use as much as you want. But about a whole cup of dates, 3 bananas, 2 to 3 bananas, depending on their size. I usually put into this, I'm thinking of like, this is the half recipe. So maybe 1 to 2 bananas and 1 to 2 carrots. I know this sounds really weird, but this is what I do. I cut the carrots into small pieces. This is all going into a food processor. I have no idea how to do this without a food processor. Sorry, y'all. Okay. And some baking powder and vanilla, cocoa powder, and cinnamon. And I put it all in the food processor, and it just goes until it's all one mush. And then take that whole mush. Honestly, the chickpeas are already cooked. The carrots can be eaten raw. The dates can be eaten raw. Everything else that's in it can also be eaten raw. So if you don't want to bake it, just skip the baking powder. And you can eat it like this, just the way that it is. If you want, you can freeze it into like an ice cube mold and just eat it cold and almost like a mousse. But if you do want to bake it into brownies, so put it in a tray and lay it out, and it bakes at 350 for about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how goopy you like your brownies. And believe it or not, all of those ingredients put together just taste like brownies. They taste like healthy brownies, but they're really good. And for me, they really fill my sweet tooth, was one of the questions that I had. Like, how are you going to take care of your sweet tooth or how do you get treats? So this is a treat, but it's like totally really healthy whole food. What it is a very healthy whole food that's also very calorie dense. Oh, one ingredient that I forgot. You could put some Chana or peanut butter. I put almond butter. How much? About, for that much, like a tablespoon or 2. Not very much, but it just kind of helps it be like, it needs a little bit of fat to be yum, though you don't have to put it in there if you don't want to. So what was I saying? So somebody asked if I use Cilan. So Cilan is date honey. And yes, I do use date honey. It's actually the only liquid sweetener that actually has fiber in it, because it's just made by cooking dates. And so it has a little bit of fiber in it. It's just broken down fiber. But I use very little of it. I always try as much as possible to use dates in my cooking. So we also make granola bars that it's like literally into a bowl. You take oats, dates, nut butter, and pecans, and vanilla, and cinnamon, and that's it. And you just mix it and mix it and mix it and break up the dates until they're totally broken up. You put and add some water to it. The other option, if you have a blender or a food processor, you can take the dates with some water and put it in the blender or food processor, and it's going to break it up into almost like a sauce. And you put that and mix your oats with that, and that's a lot easier as far as the mixing, but it makes one more thing to clean. So it just depends on what's important to you. And we bake that at 350 for like 20 minutes. And there you go. You've got granola bars. So we have so many ways in our household where we make really healthy treats that are absolutely delicious. Like we'll make sorbet out of mango. Mango by itself will make a delicious sorbet. It doesn't need sugar, it doesn't need water, it doesn't need lemon, it doesn't need anything. It's just so good. And we've really accustomed our palates to eating lots of healthy foods. We eat tons of leafy greens because they're so good for you. Leafy greens are really great for your entire system, but particularly for your cardiovascular system, because chlorophyll is very, very similar to blood. And so it gives you a lot of the things that help build up your blood. And you can get chlorophyll from parsley and basil and dill as much as you can get it from collard greens or kale or lettuce, romaine lettuce, or baby greens, or anything like that. One more question. Could Cilan substitute sugar in a cake recipe? Yes. You will end up with a wetter cake unless, here's a really cool trick. Cilan behaves, this is date honey, which you can get in Israel. I don't know if you could get it outside of Israel these days. But date honey behaves very similar. And you could say the same thing about maple syrup or about some other liquid sweeteners. They behave a lot like oil. So if you have a cake recipe that calls for oil and you're like, wait, I need something to replace the oil. And wait, it calls for sugar. But if I use a liquid sweetener, the whole recipe is going to be too wet. So this is what you do. You use a liquid sweetener and cut out the oil. And the liquid in the liquid sweetener is going to behave just like oil. Literally every year, my son asks me to make him a Black Forest cake for his birthday. And I use whole spelt flour. I use date honey, no oil, organic cocoa powder, and we use flax, ground flax instead of eggs. Just Google how do you replace eggs with flax. It's really easy. Replacing eggs with flax is the easiest thing on the planet because taste-wise, you don't notice a difference at all unless the flax has gone rancid. So flax should smell kind of like nothing or bananas. If it smells like rotten fish, it's bad. Get a new batch of flax and always keep it in your freezer. So in any case, that's what I do for a cake. Instead of oil, I just use a liquid sweetener and then you're done. And so wait, what about the rest of the Black Forest cake? Doesn't Black Forest cake have cherries, and doesn't it have those like really sweet, nasty cherries from the can? So I literally buy frozen cherries and I cook them with a little bit of date honey on the stove until they defrost and get yummy, sweet, mushy. And that's what I put as my cherry layer. And as far as frosting, I use cashews and orange juice, fresh, like I just squeeze an orange into the blender. Cashews, vanilla. I think I put a dash of salt into it just so it has like a little bit more of a kick. That's the white cream and the layers of white cream. And I have a really good blender so that cream comes out. Oh, soak the cashews for a few hours beforehand and they get so creamy. It's really, really rich. And then I take half of that cashew cream and I add cocoa powder to it. And that's how I get my chocolate frosting on the outside. And I've served this to very not vegan people. And they have pretty close to no idea that it's a totally healthy, vegan, whole food, plant-based cake. So there you go. If you decide that something's important to you, you're gonna figure out how to make it happen. Okay, do I have any questions? Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, so somebody made a point about Ayurveda. So sometimes people ask about Ayurveda or macrobiotic or all, these different types of food systems. And, if you're really passionate about what you're doing and you followed a methodology that works for you, that's absolutely fantastic. I find for most people to just keep it simple and say, just eat plants, and it's okay. Just eat as big of a variety, as many different colors, as many different plants as you can, and just enjoy what you like. You like bananas? Great, eat bananas. Does Ayurveda say bananas are good or bad? I don't know. You like them? Great. In the same way that somebody asked me like, oh, but what if it's not organic? Trust me, a not organic banana will be way, way better for you any day of the week than a very organic chicken. Always. Because our bodies are actually not designed to eat animal products. Our bodies are also not designed to get a ton of fat, a ton of protein. Our bodies aren't designed to process oil. So that's like a perfect example of like making sure you kind of have your priorities on. Like somebody will think like, oh, I shouldn't have too much sugar, so I'm not going to eat bananas, but then they have a chocolate bar instead. And it's like, no, bananas and chocolate bar, not the same thing. You'll notice that you really crave sugar. And that's because you need it. Your brain functions almost exclusively on sugar. And people ask me all the time, but what about like the keto diet or the what's it called? Paleo diet? There's no science supporting these heavy fat, heavy protein diets. If anything, they've been studied very consistently and have been shown to create massive negative health outcomes for people. Huge spikes in cholesterol, huge spikes in blood pressure, kidney disease. Like the kidneys get really taxed because it's their job to process protein. It's just too much on their system. The only way ketogenic diet has been shown to be at all helpful is for people who are epileptic, and they have to decide whether they want to have less seizures and more chances of heart disease or not. And that's kind of their debate. They'd rather have less seizures and have an increased level of heart disease because the seizures are so detrimental to their lives and cause so much suffering. But if you're not suffering from epilepsy, you're much, much better off just eating the diet that's going to keep cancer away. It's going to keep heart disease away. It's going to keep diabetes away. And if you're dealing with any of these issues or someone you love is dealing with these issues, so it's really helpful to eat a whole food plant-based diet. You can literally reverse things. literally in 2 weeks, people can get off of their diabetes medication just from eating a whole food plant-based diet. So the question is, where do I get all this research from? Somebody wanted to know. So if somebody could do me the favor of typing it in the comments, that would be so helpful for me. My favorite go-to place is a physician named Dr. Michael Greger. Dr. Michael Greger is in his 50s. He grew up with a grandmother he loved very, very dearly. And she was one of this kind of like study patients examples of a physician named Pritikin in the 1970s. And Pritikin was testing out a whole food plant-based diet to help heart disease patients. Now, Dr. Greger's grandmother was so far along in her heart disease. She'd already had, I think, like a triple bypass. She was in a really tough decision that her doctor said, there's absolutely nothing we can do for you. We give you 6 months to live. And she was in her 60s. And she followed Dr. Pritikin's protocol, which basically meant eating a whole food plant-based diet and no longer eating animal products and keeping her fat low. And she absolutely reversed her heart disease and proceeded to live not another year, not 2, not 3. She lived 30 more years. Dr. Greger was so inspired by that he decided that he wanted to be a doctor just like Pritikin, and he wanted to save lives just like him. And lo and behold, he gets medical school, and he gets through medical school, and he's shocked that nobody knows about this stuff, that so many people are still dying of heart disease. It's the number one killer of Americans and of most people in the world. And like no clue, right? Like in the Western world, like people don't know about Pritikin. And that was in the 70s, but there were people who predated Pritikin for 50 years prior. And so Dr. Greger committed his life to teaching people about nutrition and about what is in the medical literature that people like you and me can't possibly understand because the language is really complex. There's a ton of jargon in it. And we can't tell the difference between a good study and a bad study. Like, what's a study that's really shady? So for example, coconut oil companies really want to promote their product and they want people to buy it. So they sponsor, there's a coconut oil study that he shows in one of his videos where they compare coconut oil to butter. And coconut oil does better than butter. So then they're able to say, see, coconut oil is good for you. But to compare it to butter ain't really so helpful, right? Can you compare it to not eating fat, right? To not eating coconut oil, not fat, but like not eating oil at all. What's the difference? And the difference is huge as far as cholesterol levels and heart disease and disease outcomes and things like that. So in any case, I follow him a ton. Dr. Greger has a website, nutritionfacts.org. Literally, the goal of the website is to take what's in the medical literature and translate it into layman's terms. But he doesn't just ignore the medical literature. He makes videos. He has just a style that's very approachable and fun and down to earth, and he's super duper witty. And so he'll present something from the medical literature and show you the study. And he'll literally highlight what is being said in the study and so that you can see it for yourself. He highlights the parts that are kind of in normal layman's terms, and the parts that we can't fully understand, he sort of translates out of its jargon so that we can see it. So I spent a few years just scouring his website. I've watched almost every single video that he's produced. He has thousands of videos on everything from diseases to different types of foods. It's so accessible. The videos are short. He also has some longer videos that are really amazing. And it's just really accessible stuff. You want to learn about why blueberries are good for you or what they're good for? So type in blueberries on the top of the website and you'll see tons of videos about blueberries. You want to learn about heart disease. You want to learn about Alzheimer's. You want to learn about rickets, I don't know, you name it. You could put it on his website and you'll see videos about that topic and you can watch the videos. And because he's showing you the study and every single website has all of the sources underneath, it's really legit. And he's only taking from the top medical journals because he's a scientist and he's very passionate about really taking from studies that are really legit. And he'll also show you studies that are very not legit and explain to you why they're so messed up, like this butter and coconut study, for example, so that you can understand what it is that the food industry is doing in order to make you believe that certain foods that are actually really bad for you, like Pop-Tarts, low in cholesterol. And it's like, that's nice. It's a Pop-Tart, right? It's like, this isn't food. This is what Michael, what's his name? I blanked out on his name. in any case, what he calls a food-like substance. So in any case, I reference him a lot. There's also a lot of documentaries these days which make understanding whole food plant-based eating so much easier. There's a film called Forks Over Knives. There's a film called What the Health, Cowspiracy. Recently, there's a film called The Game Changers, which came out about all of these athletes who increased their performance significantly going on a whole food plant-based diet, because when you eat plants, you repair much faster, which means you can build much faster and you get sick a lot less. So there's some really cool parts of the film where they're actually using people as examples and showing what happens to their blood, what happens to their different parts of their bodies, all of that different kind of stuff. So I was planning on only spending half an hour here, and here we are half an hour later. So so in any case, I'm going to put the website nutritionfacts.org. If somebody who's on Facebook could type that in, nutritionfacts.org. I think my stuff for some reason only shows up on YouTube. And if you guys have more questions, including the questions I didn't get to answer today, please send them my way, and hopefully next Thursday I'll be able to show up again. Take care, everyone.